Okay, Kalispera, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to our wonderful part 2 in our brand new series, Meet Me on the Corner of Broome and Allen, Greek Jews on the Lower East Side of New York. We're so happy to have you with us tonight on part 2 of this series with our dear friend, Marcia Haddad, Ikonomopoulos. Just to let you know, for those of you who don't know, or those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is a brand new initiative. It's part of what's something called the Sephardic Digital Academy. It's a brand new partnership initiative between the Sephardic Jewish Brotherhood of America and a number of our communities throughout the country and around the world. And tonight, we're so excited to be co-sponsoring this evening with Kehila Kedoshei Yanana Synagogue and Museum, the only Greek Jewish Romaniote synagogue in the Western Hemisphere. And we're happy to have Marcia, who is the museum director of Kehila Kedoshei Yanana, as well as the president of the Association of Friends of Greek Jewry, with us tonight. Just to let everybody know, if you have any questions throughout the evening, please enter them into the chat box, and we'll have a few minutes at the end to take questions and give them to Marcia. So without further ado, I'll have Marcia start off. Marcia, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Could I put my share screen on?
Yes, please.
Okay. I would like to welcome you to part 2 of Meet Me at the Corner of Broome and Allen, the story of Greek Jewish arrival in New York. In part 1, we chronologically discussed the arrival of a number of the pioneers, those who arrived from 1899 through 1912, the cutoff date being just before Yanada became part of modern Greece in February of 1913. Part 2 of this 3-part series continues the story, highlighting those who came between 1913 and 1928. These immigrant stories will include those who laid the foundations for both the religious and secular aspects of the community, the rabbis, and the community leaders. I would like to thank the Sephardic Brotherhood of America and Kehila Kedoshei Yanana. I would personally like to thank Ethan Marcus, his brother Andrew, our president Marvin Marcus, and the board of Kehila Kedoshei Yanana, and of course all those wonderful people who shared precious family photos with me. On May 18th, 1908, the SS La Lorraine sailed into the harbor of New York City, having departed from Le Havre on May 9th. The weather was delightful, a bit warmer than usual, but certainly nothing to complain about. A rather pleasant welcome for Rabbi David Davidson and his family, his wife Rebecca, and 6-year-old son Samuel. It was a Monday, and the front page of the New York Tribune was filled with news from the weekend. Growing automobile traffic and the repercussions of speeding and the accidents filled the columns of the newspaper. Although the first automobile accident in New York City occurred in 1896, 12 years later, the novelty of the horseless wagon had not worn off. This was the world Rabbi Davidson and his family were entering. He had originally arrived in 1903, but was returned home to Yanada to bring his wife and child. The New York City he had first seen in 1903 had changed so much by 1908. When he first arrived on September 5th, 1903 from Le Havre, the Williamsburg Bridge had not yet opened for traffic, while in 1908 it had become a major connection between Brooklyn and Lower Manhattan. And Delancey Street was nicknamed the Jew Street, due to all the Jewish businesses that lined the street. On the 1903 ship manifest, Rabbi Davison is listed as Samuel Davison, an obvious distortion of the family name. The local newspaper in 1908 had an article on how educated mothers could reduce infant mortality. Nobody was politically correct then. An ignorant mother could learn all that was necessary to save her baby's life. Clean milk, clean babies, and clean air was the formula. Certainly this exhibition would have interested Rebecca, who by 1920 would have 6 additional children. Unfortunately, Rebecca could not read English. In fact, she was illiterate, not uncommon among Jewish women in Yanada during this period. Simon Esser arrived on June 17, 1910. It was a rainy Friday, New York afternoon, as 24-year-old Simon Esser took his first steps on the streets of New York. His address of destination was 236-244 Eldred Street, around the corner from 280 Broome Street, where 17 years later, the synagogue where he would help officiate services would be located. His older son, Menachem Mani, was born in Greece and would arrive later with his wife, Louisa. His other children would be born in New York. On page 4 of the New York Daily Tribune was an article on the soon-to-be admission of Arizona and New Mexico to the United States. While Simon's former world of the Ottoman Turkish Empire was slowly disintegrating, his new world of the United States was expanding. In 1917, according to his World War I draft registration, Simon was living at 95 Allen Street and was employed as a cantor and a priest at 98 Forsyth. Simon also worked with the manufacturer of kimonos to supplement his meager salary as a religious leader. Jesula Cohen arrived August 31st, 1912, on a typically hot, humid New York summer day. On the ship manifest of the SS Kaiser Franz Joseph, Jesula is described as a 27-year-old Turkish-Jewish laborer. His father, Moses, stated as the closest relative he left behind, and going to his brother Judah at 101 Allen Street. He is traveling with his wife Esther and his 10-year-old son Moses, who we will learn more about as Mo Cohen. In the evening world, homes in Queens are selling from $1,800, this is 1912, and Labor Day excursions to Rockaway Beach are advertised. Rabbi Jesula Levi arrived Monday, July 14, 1913. He's described as 45 years old and an ordained rabbi. On the ship manifest of the Kaiser Franz Joseph, Rabbi Levi and his wife Esther were accompanied by his 6 oldest children, his 2 youngest who would be born in the United States. His occupation is given as teacher. Front page headlines of the New York Sun are dominated by battles in the Second Balkan War, highlighting Ottoman Turkish losses, something Jesula would be well aware of. He actually, as the rabbi in Yanina, welcomed the King of Greece when Yanina became part of modern Greece in February of 1913. Jesula the news that was highlighted in the domestic newspapers highlighted a railroad strike and the fear that mail would be delayed. Times have not changed. This here is the entrance vestibule. Here you have Jesula Levi's name as the rabbi. And if you look up here, you'll see Leon Cochimero as rabbi, and I will explain that a little later. Jesula Levi would serve the community until his death in 1946. Rabbi Bekoraki Matzil arrived on the 29th of October, 1919. It was a pleasant October day when the Megale Hellas pulled into the port of New York City. It was Wednesday, October 29th, and among the passengers disembarking was Rabbi Bekoraki Matzil, his wife Amelia, and 5 of his children. This picture here was actually taken in Greece before Rabbi Bekoraki Matzil arrived, and we found out about this picture because it was on the back of photo postcards were very popular then. So this was a photograph, and on the back was the postcard, and it was sent to Joe Joseph, not the Joe Joseph, but another Joe Joseph, because he married Serena, who was the oldest daughter of Rabbi Bekoraki Matzil, and this was the picture that was enclosed. So this is the rabbi and his wife, and these were 4 of his children that was back in Greece with him before he came over. He was on the ship with his wife Amelia and 5 of his children, ranging in age from 3-year-old Anna, who would become Jean, to 11-year-old Isaac. The local newspapers were filled with stories reflecting the worldwide changes in the aftermath of World War I. In New York City, the Sun reported on the front page that the Star Opera Company, due to perform at the Lexington Theater, had disbanded. Its attempts to perform the German operas, as it was known for, in English, with only the lead role singing in German, were rebuffed. Americans were not ready to hear the German language. Another article on the front page, a dispatch from Berlin, reported that the new German army is pygmy beside the old one. World War I was over. The armistice signed on November 11, 1918. Greece's brief participation in the war enabled her to join the victors in claiming remnants of the former Ottoman Turkish Empire. The end of the war also enabled some remaining Jews in Greece to leave and join their relatives in the United States. Among them was Rabbi Bekoraki Matzil. The world Rabbi Matzil was leaving had drastically changed since his younger brothers Morris and Harry had left for the United States. Greece was, in 1919, a primarily agrarian country with little developed industry. This is the Matzil family with all of their children. And this little boy over here is Saul Matzil, who sits on our board of trustees at Kehela Kadoshi Yanada. The world Rabbi Matzil was entering was very different from the one he left behind. The population of Greece was 5,860,000 in 1919, and the city of his birth, Yanada, was a small provincial town. The total population of New York City was only 300,000 less than the population of all of Greece. Rabbi Matzil gave the address of 195-197 Christie Street and the firm of Matzil Brothers as his address of destination on the ship manifest. His brothers Harry and Morris had come to the United States earlier, Harry in 1911 and Morris in 1912. The two brothers had created a ladies' garment company called Matzil Brothers. To support his growing family, Bekoraki served as a rabbi, both for the growing Yanoti community in Lower Manhattan, and then as the community moved into Brooklyn as the original rabbi of Kehela Kadoshi Yanada of Mapleton, first located at 66th Street in Bensonhurst. The first Mapleton synagogue was located within an Ashkenazi synagogue, and it was only after his death in 1962 that the second Mapleton synagogue, now located in his own building, was opened for worship. This picture here is a bar mitzvah picture of another Saul Matzil, not our Saul Matzil. This Saul Matzil was the son of Morris Matzil. And this was a typical scene. Everybody would be related in this picture, either by marriage or by blood. One of the last spiritual leaders to come over was Israel Chametz. The family arrived on the Asia on April 5th, 1928. Israel is listed as a Chacham and an importer-exporter. He lived at 96 Rivington, 167 Orchard, and 117 Ludlow. The last address is where he died. When the Chametz family applied for immigration to the United States, the quotas put into law in 1924 had already been filled. Kehela Kadoshi Yanada wrote a letter to the authorities requesting that the Chametz family be allowed to come to the United States since the services of Rabbi Israel Chametz were needed at the synagogue on 280 Broome Street. A copy of the original letter is on display in the museum at Kehela Kadoshi Yanada, thanks to Erwin Joseph, the son of Serena. Actually, it was a wee bit of a lie, that letter. We were not in the need of another rabbi. We certainly had sufficient rabbis for the small community. But Rabbi Chametz's, Israel Chametz's wife was a sister of Rabbi Davidson's wife, and they had not seen each other in over a decade. So the synagogue arranged for the family to come over, and thank God they did. This was 1928. Shortly afterwards, all of the children would have been lost in the Holocaust. Rabbi Chametz's family became an important part of Kehela Kadoshi Yanada. This is Serena, and these are three of Israel Chametz's children. This is Isaac. Over here is Molly, Mazalto. They stayed very connected to their Greek Jewish roots and to the synagogue. On November 9th, 1911, I'm trying to get this out. Okay. I'm trying to admit the people in the waiting room because they're on my screen. On On November 9th, 1911, 18-year-old Joseph stepped off the Alice into the port of New York. Having left from popular streets on October 23, 1911, he had listed his father Isaac as the closest relative left behind in Yanina and was going to his brother Jacob Joseph at 128-130 Allen Street on the Lower East Side. The New York Evening World was publishing its final issue. The headline on the front page spoke of a riot in New York. I don't know what's happening here. I can't move my thing. Okay, spoke of a riot in New York due to a garbage strike. This was a cartoon in the paper about the garbage strike. And this is actually what the garbage pickup looked like back then. They used horses and carts instead of trucks. On the Thursday of Joe Joseph's arrival, the streets of New York City must not have smelled so sweet. Certainly quite different from the fresh autumn breezes that blew over Lake Pamviotis from the Pindos Mountain Range north of Yanina. Lord & Taylor was selling real Irish lace collars at $2.95, and Bloomingdale's was selling ladies' superb tailored suits at $15. Mrs. One-Piece sailor suits were selling at Macy's for $10.74. Items that might have interested Joe a few years later as he became a manufacturer of ladies' garments. Joe would have found the sale at the local supermarket quite interesting, coffee at 27 cents a pound and 13 cents a can of peas. Certainly the concept of supermarkets had not yet made it to the Ottoman Turkish Empire, and the fact that one could receive double S&H green trading stamps would have puzzled him even more. There was only a slight drizzle, unseasonably mild temperatures on November 9, 1911, as Joe made his way to his brother's apartment on Allen Street between Delancey and Rivington. The headlines in the local newspapers were quite different from just a few months before, when on March 25, 1911, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory in Greenwich Village burned down, taking the lives of 146 garment workers, most recent immigrants. Joe would have his own industrial accident in 1932, where another Yanoti, David Billell, died in an elevator shaft at 521 Broadway, the site of Joe Joseph's factory. Joe was known for his philanthropy. Many people don't know the story of how far that extended. This was before the time of workers' compensation. There was no way to help the family of David Solomon Billell, but Joe Joseph paid for everything for the family for as long as they needed him. He paid out of his own pocket. This here is a picture of his factory workers. They were honoring him in this particular photo. And this is a letter from a Hellenic organization thanking Joe Joseph for his contribution of textiles and clothing that were sent to Greece during World War II. Joe became one of the first presidents of Karakidoshi Yanina, located at 280 Broome Street. By 1926, the Yanina community had grown substantially, requiring a synagogue of its own. Leon Colchimero, as mentioned before, helped found the Burial Society, the synagogue, and the sisterhood. Leon was one of 11 children of Jesula, and Rachel Colchimero, and an early pioneer, as was fully discussed in part 1 of this series. He not only helped found the synagogue, but also the Burial Society and the sisterhood. Now, up here, we see his name as a rabbi. As great a person as he was never a rabbi. We found out when we did the restoration of the plaques in the vestibule that rabbi had been scratched out and then put back in again. So we left it there the second time. This is the cemetery at Mount Carmel. And up here on the top of this plaque is where Leon Colchimero's name reads, and these were the founders of the United Brotherhood of Yanina. And on our own entranceway, there is a plaque which notes the fact that Leonard Colchimero, a descendant of Leon Colchimero, was the architect who oversaw the restoration of our synagogue. Another of the early leaders was Avasai Ganis. He was born in Constantinople, the oldest son of Jesse Ganis and Diana Colchimero Ganis. I personally often wondered how it was that Jasula, he could not have been an only child in a city like Yanina, where families numbered anywhere from 8, 9, 10, 11 children. But since then, we found, now this is a picture here. This is Diana Colchimero Ganis. This is Avasai in the picture, and these are two of her other sons. And this was taken shortly after her arrival in the United States. She was a widow at that time, as you can see by the outfit she was wearing. She also was the patriarch of the matriarch of the major branch of the Ganis family. On arrival in 1906, Avasai Ganis lists his address as 94 Allen Street, and in 1907 he is listed as the secretary of the early Yanoti Burial Society. This is the later picture. His first wife, Serena, passed away shortly after childbirth, and she had 2 other daughters, and then with his second wife, he had 2 additional daughters. Thank God he made money, because if it was back in Greece, he would have run out of money for the dowries. Zakaria Levy, another secular leader, was born in Yanina. He arrived in 1903. He's listed in a La America article of 1910 as a founder of the Burial Society, the Yanoti Burial Society. We came across this article through Bob Bedford from the Foundation for the Advancement of Sephardic Studies and Culture, who translated the article that was in Ladino. We will be getting the original article. It lists early founders of Kela Kadosh Yanina. Abraham David was another secular leader, businessman. He had a shop on Allen Street, A. David and Sons at 98 Allen Street, selling, of course, kimonos, aprons, and bathrobes. He was one of 9 children of David Ben Eliah and Simcha. The family is known at different times as David, Eliezer, or Eliah. This is also the family that produced the famous poet, Yosef Eliah. Abraham came to New York from Greece in 1907 and had a shop on Allen Street. His children, except for one, married into Yanoti families, Confino, Baruch, De Castro, Yom Tov, and Menachem, as was so often the custom with children of pioneer immigrants. This is a picture of the family back in Greece, and this is actually Abraham in the picture here. I love this picture because it displays one of the traditions that was very prominent amongst Greek Jews and also Greek Christians. This here contains a photograph. This is a daughter of the family that got married and was living in Constantinople at the time the picture was taken. So to include her in the picture, they held the picture up as part of the family picture. Many of the members of the David family married into other Yanoti families. This is Rachel Baruch and David David. And here you have Bertha and Ezra Cohen. From 1911 to 1924, many from the small Greek Jewish community of Yanina would make the journey to the New World. In fact, half of the 4,000 member community would leave. The early pioneers had paved the way, providing spiritual and secular leaders. In 1924, the Immigration Act of 1924 limited the number of immigrants allowed entry into the United States through a national origins quota. The quota provided immigration visas to 2% of the total number of people of each nationality in the United States as of the 1890 national census. This immigration law was really centered around undesirable immigrants. And who were the undesirable immigrants? They were immigrants coming from Eastern Europe and Southern Europe. Jews from Eastern Europe, Greeks from Southern Europe. The Italians were undesirable at a former time, and they became undesirable again after 1924. If you look at some of the cartoons and newspapers of that period, you know, anti-Semitism had not really set in until the beginning of the 20th century. Before that, you would see horrendous cartoons describing the Pope as a dragon. That was the fear then. It was the fear of the other, the fear of those that spoke foreign languages, the fear of those who looked different than they did. Times have not changed. This is the corner of Broome and Allen. Okay, who was Broome and who was Allen? John Broome, over here, was an American merchant and politician who was Lieutenant Governor of New York from 1804 to 1910. And this is Master Commandant William Henry Allen, the youngest person to command a Navy ship in the War of 1812. He was killed in action at the age of 28. His exploits included the capture of a British ship, HMS Macedonian. Of course, this corner is now also called Hygiene Way. So our prominent Hygiene can compete with these two fairly unknown heroes of New York history. Some of the Yanotis who lived on Broome, Allen, and nearby Orchard and Eldred Street before Kehila Kadosh Yanada was built. As you can see by the names here, you had addresses of 39 Allen, 7498, 100 Allen, 275, 279, 297 Allen, 110 Eldridge, and 54 Orchard, where the Janee family lived at one time. These people all lived close enough to where the synagogue would be, and the synagogue would be built a place that was in walking distance for these observant Jews. I'm going to talk about numbers of Addis families. By the way, we have a number of Addis families in our community, and they all claim that they're not related to each other, which is really interesting because we have in one building on Broome Street, two Addis families, one from Cal Addis and one from Rose Addis, and the names are so similar in the family. We are working on a master Addis tree family tree, where we will hopefully, when I say we, this is the work of Barry Mionis, we'll be able to connect all these Addis families and see where the common ancestor is, if there is one. These are the Nisim Addis arrived July 31st, 1911. He was described as an 18-year-old son of Stamu Addis who was traveling with him. His occupation is listed as a laborer, and he's going to his uncle Jacob Addis, uptown at West 100th Street. By 1920, he's married and now going by the name of William, no longer Nisi, living with his wife Esther on the Lower East Side at 74 Allen. In 1940, the family is living at 92 Allen Street with 4 daughters, and Mary Addis was the oldest. I have so many fond memories of Mary from friends of hers on the Lower East Side. She had a smile that everybody remembered, and I was very lucky to receive from both her sons beautiful photographs. This is July 11th, 1913. This is the day that Caliph Addis arrived. And this was the king of Greece, Constantine, who was going to a conference in Paris at that time. Of course, there was the impending World War I, and everybody was hoping it would not happen. They had just gotten over the Balkan Wars. This was in the Saturday Evening Post, and this is how boys could make money easy. You know, you would be able to make something like $2 to $15 a week, which was a lot of money then, but they don't say here how many newspapers you have to sell to make that money. The Caliph Addis family arrived July 11th, 1913. It was a Friday, and the temperature was fair for a July day, the high only reaching 81. He's going to his son Nisim at 58 Allen Street. The front page of the New York Sun had an article the city was considering stopping half-day holidays on Saturdays to save about $300,000. And a doctor announced that an X-ray cure for tuberculosis. See, fake news was around even then. This is, this gentleman, Caliph Addis, was the grandfather of our Cal Addis, and this is a picture of him on his 90th birthday. Chaim Addis arrived with his son Joseph on August 8th, 1916. And here he is holding up one of his children. This was his other son, Nissim, who served in World War II and unfortunately died at the Battle of the Bulge at the age of 19. This is Joseph Addis's graduate. He was 16 years old at the time, and I guess this I couldn't have been high school at the age of 16, probably intermediary school. And here, this is, I had the honor of going to Henri Chapelle Military Cemetery with Rose Addis, and this is Rose's uncle here, Nissim. He died January 23rd, 1945. We were also accompanied by a man by the name of Jaime Longoria, who was saved. His life was saved by another Yanoti Jew, Abraham Marcia, and we'll be telling those stories when we get to the next session, which will cover World War II, both here for the Greek Jews in New York and those that served in the United States Armed Forces, and then those that arrived from Greece after the war, after the Holocaust. Sam Nachmias was typical of Yanoti families on the Lower East Side. The Nachmias family arrived in 1913 and lived at a number of addresses. Excuse me one second. But 275 Broome, right across from Kehelik Kadosh, that's in the memory of their children. They were deeply involved with Kehelik Kadosh. This is the Nachmias family on the streets of the Lower East Side. And this is Sam and his wife, who was from the Naftali family, sitting on a bench at the Allen Street Park. Max Nachmias celebrated his bar mitzvah at Kehelik Kadosh, and here he is at his wedding with Eva. We say amongst the Yanotis, when they marry an Ashkenazi woman, they're marrying up. This is the Ashkenaz family. I won't keep all your negative comments for later on, okay? The Ashkenazi family also lived on Broome Street for many years. This is Murray Ashkenaz here with friends of his. They called themselves the Broome Street Boys. And this is a picture of Murray on the roof of 297 Broome Street. This is Murray, who was he attended a wedding, a family wedding. And this is Murray with his wife, Rose Ashkenaz here. Rose she was from the Capone family, and Rose, of course, is the president of the Sisterhood of Yanina. The family of Mo Cohn lived on Broome Street, and Mo was the son of Rabbi Cohn that we discussed before. This family also married into early Yanoti families, the Mioni, the Ashkenazi, the Kofino, the Maza. And he's sitting with all the women here at the Allen Street Park. And this is his mother in the apartment on Broome Street. This is Meyer Mioni in World War II. And these are members of the Kofino family that on a stoop in New York City, also related to the Mionis family and the Cohn family. The Samuels family lived on the Lower East Side before moving out to the outer boroughs, but before the move, matches were made with other prominent pioneer families. This was very common among first generation. It was even more common back in Yanina. 2 Samuel brothers married 2 Menachem sisters. And 2 Menachem family members married 2 sisters from the Nachman family. Mattathias arrived on, he's, by the way, related to the Colchomero family, who their surname was originally Mattathias and not Colchomero. Mattathias arrived on August 13th, 1913, and had his shop on Allen Street. It was a ladies' underwear shop. His family married into with other Yanoti families. This here is a delightful acquisition. This is actually the wedding announcement for Leah Negrin, who married Abraham Mathios. That's the name got changed to Mathios from Mattathias in 1921 at Clinton Hall on Clinton Street. And this is the wedding picture of the couple from 1921. This is a family of David and Hanula Matzah. They arrived in 1919. This is the Aaron Matzah and his wife Julia Benveniste. They got married in Portland, Oregon, and that's where Richard Matzah and his family now live. We have Richard Matzah was the grandson of Aaron Matzah and has visited Greece with the Association of Friends of Greek Jewry many times. The last time he took his grandchildren, so this is actually his grandson holding a Torah scroll in the synagogue in Yanina. Chaim Herman Meonis arrived January 5th, 1921. I put this on because not only is this picture taken on Delancey Street where he had his shop, but this is one of the few pictures that I have of a bungalow in Rockaway and what it looked like. And there were so many Yanoti families that used to go there to spend their summer. It didn't look like it was going to last much longer after that summer, but it held the Meoni and the Carrito families that vacationed there together. Now we come to the story of Shorty Matzah, one of my favorite stories. I first met Shorty in this photograph here that was given to me by Max Nachmias, the son of Sam Nachmias over here. And I said to Max, because all the nicknames that Yanotis had, what did Shorty do? Well, they were all short. I mean, they would all come up to my shoulder. So, I mean, how short was Shorty? And Max said to me he was very short. Well, Shorty's granddaughter gave me more on the story. It appeared that he had to stand on a crate to be the same height as his wife when they got married. But there's a beautiful plaque in the synagogue next to Shorty's Aleph, donated by the family, that states that his attributes are measured by more than just his height. It was a beautiful testimony to how loved he was. He arrived in Boston Harbor on August 11th, and this photo over here, he worked as a bootblack, shining shoes at the Westminster Hotel in Boston. He stayed there for a short while, and he actually served in the United States Armed Forces. This is his registration for World War I. He did not see active duty overseas, but he was always very proud of his service. By 1920, he was living in Harlem. And that's where the family would live before they moved out to New Jersey and other places. This is another Boston arrival. This is Morris Cabellis, who arrived in Boston Harbor on September 21st, 1916. His wife, Eva Eliezer, came over in 1921. This is Eva here. These are the parents of Shirley Cabelli Paganetti. Here, this is a fascinating picture. This is Eva, or Chava Eliezer. If you look at this picture, she looks very different from the rest of the family, and that's because her photo was photoshopped into the picture. She had gotten engaged, and she sent her photo to Greece, and the rest of the family photoshopped her in. This was Eva when she was 10 years old. The picture is also very sad because this picture, the Eliezer family became the Besker family, and only one, Sam Besker, survived from this photo. The Holocaust took the rest of the family, and we have Sam's sons, Joe and Mark Besker, who are very much a part of our community in New York. This is the Cabellis family. I call this my Mutra picture. If you look at Shirley, she has the puss on. She's really annoyed. What happened is Shirley wanted to sit, but her father said to him, no, your mother will sit. And then Shirley said, well, I want to sit. And she got a smack, and then the picture was taken. So that's her Mutra face over there. Joseph Negrin and Serena Negrin. This is a very interesting story and very untypical of the story of the early immigrants. They arrived in the port of New York on July 2nd, 1912. They sailed from Patras and, unlike most other Yanotis, did not come in steerage. The family of 6, Joseph and Serena, and 4 of their children sailed first class. 3 other children would be born in New York. Most of Joseph and Serena Negrin's children would marry into other Yanoti families. This here is a beautiful wedding photo of Diana Gaddis and Sam Negrin, and then Diana's brother, Sammy Gaddis, and his wife, Frida Cooper. So the 2 couples got married together. This happened a number of times during World War II. The men were going overseas. The families arranged, in this instance, a double wedding. And everybody, probably with the exception of poor Frida Cooper's family, were related to each other in this picture. The Negrin family became a vital part of our community. This is Sam Negrin before his wedding. And he was an accountant, and he actually worked pro bono for the sisterhood. And this is Sam's son, Joel Negrin. This is his bar mitzvah picture. And Joel is still very attached to the community, as is his sister, Serena. This last picture is what a better way to end this session than with a picture of Broome and Allen Street Boys' Dinner in 1940. We're going to talk more about the Broome and Allen Street Boys next time. We're going to cover the community at the time of World War II in New York, and those people who came after the war, and those Greek Jews that fought for the United States Armed Forces in World War II. I want to thank you all very much. We have time for questions. This worked out well. There's a number of people were concerned about the convention, as I was. So, Ethan, give me the questions, okay, dear?
Great. Thank you so much, Marcia, for another wonderful program for part 2 in our series. Just to let everybody know, this program will be available after tonight. It's all live stream on Facebook at Facebook.com/Sephardic Brotherhood. And we'll also eventually get all the information up on YouTube as well shortly. Now, just to start off, 1 second, with a couple open questions. One of the questions that actually came up was many of these people were referred to, a couple of the rabbinic leaders of KKJ and the Greek Jewish community. They all had rabbinic ordination. Do we know what yeshivot they received them from? Because there were a number of yeshivot in Yanina, in Salonika, even in Larissa as well. There were well-known yeshivot in Greece as well.
Actually, there was no yeshiva in Yanina. Those that were ordained rabbis went to Salonika, and there were only 2 from these pictures. One was Rabbi Levi, and the other one was Rabbi Bekoraki Matzo. The other were just spiritual leaders, much in the same way as we have run Kehela Kadosha Yanina for the past 60 years. So that was also a tradition of the community.
Okay, great. Okay, now, maybe you could speak also a little bit about the related communities, how they grew out from the central community Lower East Side to also Harlem, the Bronx, and even up until Mapleton as well.
Okay, well, actually, the communities up in Harlem started to grow even before the existence of the Broome Street Synagogue, because there were many that came right off the ships and went straight up to Harlem because of the Shinazi Tobacco Company. And then from there, it was called Sheriff Israel of Yanina, and then they went into the Bronx. The Brooklyn community, originally, they would meet in Williamsburg. There was no regular synagogue. There was only something that was set up for high holiday services. As they moved further into Brooklyn, into Bensonhurst, that's when the Mapleton Synagogue was established, but that was not until the 1960s. So they still had their connection to Kehila Kadosha Yanina, and Morris Yomtov actually was very instrumental in the Mapleton Synagogue after the death of Rabbi Bekoraki Matzo. But they were part of us. If anything, the downtown synagogue was the sister synagogue, and the connections were always made there. I don't think there were ever any plaques, memorial plaques, up in the Harlem community. So if they had memorial plaques, they were down by us. I know they did have memorial plaques up in Mapleton, and when that synagogue closed down, they gave the plaques over to the Canarsie Sephardic Center, and then we got them by us not too many years ago. So it's a little bit different there. Elliot Cochamero had a question. Did you see Elliot's question there?
Not yet, but I do have a couple questions before that.
Oh.
One question was that, and we'll get Elliot, happy to get your question if you just enter the chat again, happy to answer it as well. Adam Kofinas from Atlanta asks, do we know of other sites that were looked at for Kehillat Kadosh Yanana other than 280 Broome Street, and why specifically that location at 280 Broome Street?
I don't know of any other sites. I do know that according to ship manifests, even before the synagogue was built, there were Yanotis that gave the address of 280 Broome Street as their address of destination. There was a Kafanian that was on the ground floor. We still have the remnants of some pipes upstairs that had to be owned by a Greek Jew. I think it was because it was in the center of where they lived. And it was probably those that were living in the building at the time before it became a synagogue were also Yanana Jews living there. So it probably was just easier to relocate them because of the connection. And then the synagogue, we kept the walls. By the way, we never tore down the walls of the building that was there. We still have the walls of the building that was a Civil War. The outside exterior walls were built around 1891. And then we used to have in the basement floor where we found the remnants of two old style tenement buildings that date back to the Civil War. So the physical structure is still there. It's just what takes place within it is different now.
Great. Another question here. Were there any particular members in the Romeo community that became relatively wealthy because of business or other economic, new opportunities in the United States?
Okay, most of them were involved in the low end of the garment industry, aprons, nightgowns, kimonos or house dresses, as they would be called now. Some did well. Some of the companies are still in business. I still have in my collection nightgowns from Erwin Joseph of blessed memory. He used to send me all the time. Their company was moved out to California. Wealthy, I don't think so. I know we have one member of the Yanoti community that one time had a position on the board of directors at Princeton and has been very philanthropic to us personally and to the Jewish community of Yanana also. They didn't make the type of money that other immigrants might have made. Even amongst the Sephardic world, they were basically in the rag business. That's what it was. There were some families that were more prominent. The Russos certainly were more prominent with Rustogs. Jack Baker with Sport Tempo. They had, but that, it wasn't an industry that you made a big fortune with.
Another question here. Could you comment on the exact location of where the Bronx synagogue was?
Oh my, there were two Bronx synagogues. One was in Kingbridge and the other one was in Hunts Point, I think, in that area. I have it in my files. If that person emails me, I'll give you the address there.
And the Harlem synagogue as well, excuse me.
The Harlem synagogue, okay, according to Millie Fruit, she told me, I believe it was on 111th, West 111th Street, right after, north of Central Park. It was up there. That's where most of them lived, right off of Fifth Avenue in that area there, west and east, right on top of Central Park. Again, I have that address in my file.
Another question here. Is there a specific title to who owned the 280 Broome Street land before it became KKJ, the property itself?
Do we have that title?
Or do we know who owned the property before it became Kehillat Kadosh Yanana?
No, that was not in the archival records. We don't know that. If someone wants to go back and dig in some more. Elliot, you want to come up from Florida?
And as a follow-up, do we know how the ownership was transferred to Kehila Kadosh Yanana? Who did the purchase?
No, no, we don't know at all. None of that. We don't have the records of that. Actually, the Brotherhood is the owner of the building now. At one time, we were the owner of the building, but it's that's buried in history. There, we don't have that at all.
Here's the question you're waiting for from Elliot. Could Marcia please explain how the name Kochomiro was originally Mattathias?
Okay, we know it was originally Mattathias because of Elias Kochomiro. When he came over with the name Mattathias. It's always been the family legend that it was a nickname, that whoever was the patriarch of the family was so picky in picking out his fabrics that it was if he was separated in the leavened from the unleavened and saying the Kalkamira prayer. So it became Kalkamira. What happened with finding out with Elias coming over as Mattathias, we were able to make the connection to the Mattathias name. And back in Yanana, there are Mattathias families that claim their connection to the Kochomiro family. There might have been more than one Mattathias family. I mean, it was a male Hebrew surname, but that was the original name of the Kochomiro family, was Mattathias.
One question here. You said that the Kehila Kadosh Yanana is the only Roman Yod synagogue in the Western Hemisphere. How many are there around the world?
Okay, I believe there are, we have Yanana, you have Volos, you have Trikila, you have Kalkis, you have Larissa, you have Etz Chaim in Crete. There's only 11 synagogues in all of Greece now, so I'm counting 6 possibly that are, and one in Athens. Okay, one in Athens, there's a Roman Yod synagogue there. Only 11 synagogues survived World War II. There were 40 synagogues in Greece before. There were more than 40. There were 40 in Salonika alone. But some of the synagogues, if you go into the Larissa synagogue, you can perform either the Roman Yod minhag or the Sephardic minhag. They have a beamer in the center, and then they have a raised platform on the far western wall. So both services can take place there in the Larissa synagogue. A lot of those communities in Thessaly had both Sephardic and Roman Yod Jews. So the only true Roman Yod, pure Roman Yod communities was in Kalkis, in Yanana, and if you want to count Crete, because Crete had 2 synagogues, so they were separate in that way. But over the course of the years, the Sephardim sort of dominated and swallowed up the smaller Roman Yod communities. We also had in Prevasa, which is not there anymore. You still have a Roman Yod synagogue on the island of Corfu, but there were, before World War II, there were 4 synagogues there, and only one was the Roman Yod. So it gets complicated because many of those that practice in the Corfu synagogue are not of the Roman Yod minhag. They're more from the Pugliese, the Italian Jews that were there.
There's also, just to mention, there's also the Roman Yod synagogue in Jerusalem as well.
Yes, there's actually 2.
Right.
There's one in Tel Aviv also. Yeah.
And then 1 or 2 more questions here. You mentioned that the Negrin family sailed to New York first class. Were they a relatively wealthy family, and did they give up their business in Yanana when they arrived in the United States? They
were actually in Albania. They were merchants, probably, I think it was in Berat that the main branch family did, but that's where many Yanoti Jews were born in or worked in Albania because of the port. They were close to the port of Flori over there, where Yanana is really landlocked. So that's where they made their money. They certainly had money when they came over. I don't think they maintained the level of opulence that they had in the old world when they came over here, although they made very good marriages with their children.
And then maybe you can comment up to World War II, how close a relationship did the Roman Yod community on the Lower East Side keep with its native community in Yanana and throughout Greece?
The community here in New York?
Correct. How kind of close with the community in New York to Yanana pre-war?
Very, very close. For instance, the community here provided dowries for poor girls back in Canada. We have a letter in the synagogue that was sent, it was part of the estate from Alex Samuel's wife, because part of her family was the Nachman family. And there was a letter written to a member of the Nachman family in New York requesting money to help with matzot at Passover. So we had many instances where they needed our help financially. As the community started to dwindle from immigration, and as the community suffered through what was going on with the Balkan Wars and World War I, even before the devastation of the Holocaust, they needed our help, and we've kept that close connection. And I have to say, I'm very proud of the Yanina community here in the United States. There has never been a time when the community of Greece has asked for something that we haven't been able to help them. And hopefully we can continue that.
And are there any last questions before we end? Please feel free to write them in the chat. We'd be happy to read them out.
Excuse me?
I was just asking if no, it's okay. I was saying if there's any other questions, please, if anybody else has any additional questions, we don't want to miss any. And if you have additional questions after this program, you can feel free to email Marcia directly at museum@kkjsm.org. And I'll type that into the chat right now.
I actually have one question. If you can unmute Annette Frome.
Sure.
Annette, okay. Annette, I'm doing research on the Bacola family, and I believe that's your family, if I'm not mistaken. She's not unmuted. Can you unmute her, or does she have to do that herself?
I got it. Yes, my grandfather was Joseph Bacola, a different one than you showed last week.
Okay. I'm trying to collect as many Bacola family trees as possible because I have a puzzle that I have to fit in a piece of. I'm looking for Rebecca Bacola, who went to Manchester in England, and we're trying to trace her family lineage. We've done DNA tests on a number of Bacolas here in the United States. If you have anything, get in touch with me. If you have anything to add with your family tree, it would be very helpful.
I can send it to you. Rebecca is a name in our family, but there were several Bacola families in Yanina.
Yeah.
Our family actually were Yanyots, but they lived in Filiatis, which is close to Albania.
You know, most of the Bacola family trees that I have were in Filiatis also, and that came up continuously on that. For those of people who don't know, Filiatis was an area that was right on the border between Albania and Greece, and at times it was completely in Albania, and then after 1913, part of it became in Greece. That's most of the Bacola families come from there. And the thing that's really been puzzling me with this family in England, they have very poor methods of keeping their archives. For instance, no ship manifest. We can go on Ancestry, we can bring up ship manifest. They didn't think it was important to keep the records of ship manifests of immigrants that came over, which is ridiculous. They also, a lot of the records you can't access until 100 years, but they don't have the richness of archival material that we're able to access here. If I knew where Rebecca sailed from, that would give me, and I guarantee, I'm almost sure it had to be Albania. That would give me a lot of help in tracking down, you know, who she is and what family she belongs to. But any help you can give me, Annette, I'd be very appreciative.
I can share that with you. It'd be my pleasure, Marcia.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, with that, we reached our time for this evening. I want to thank Marcia again for a wonderful part 2 in her amazing 3-part series on Greek Jews on the Lower East Side. Meet me in the corner of Broome and Allen. Just a reminder to everyone, this is all a volunteer initiative. We rely on your support. It's all a nonprofit initiative with Kehila Kedosh Liana and Sephardic Brotherhood. If you're ever interested in sponsoring one of our series through the Sephardic Digital Academy or contributing to Kehila Kedosh Liana or the Sephardic Brotherhood, please feel free to reach out. You can reach us at info@sephardicbrotherhood.com or info@kkjsm.org. We really appreciate any of your support. Thank you again, Marcia. Everyone have a wonderful night, and we should see you next Monday at 8 p.m. Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you all. Thank you all.